Well, I was pretty sure things were going to go this way yesterday when I made my initial reaction to to the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but it was confirmed shortly after I recorded that President Trump is in fact going to appoint someone to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg as quickly as possible, probably coming in the next couple of days. Now, the leaks that we're hearing is that it's a woman of Cuban descent, because they want to try and, I guess, make it from an identity politics perspective as difficult as possible for the Democrats to go after this person, which is smart considering what happened with Kavanaugh. I would probably stay away from a man at this point. And by the way, they did the same thing to Clarence Thomas, so it's not even, staying away from a white man wouldn't be enough. They would do the same thing to a black man because they did it to a black man 30 years ago. And of course, Ginsburg was a woman, so it'll be from an identity for the identity politics people. They won't be able to make their whole case because they're trading a Jewish woman for potentially a Hispanic woman. And a lot of Cubans are just white people, so they don't really count as people of color. But this woman kind of. She doesn't look totally white, so I guess they can kind of pass her off as that. She's at least as non-white as Ginsburg was, because Ginsburg was Jewish, so they when it's convenient, they count Jewish people as being not white, even though they have white skin. And of course, most Jewish people in North America are descended from Europeans, not from Middle Easterners or Central Asians or something like that, or Ethiopians. There are non-white Jewish people in the world. It's just that most of them are not in North America. And while I do normally roll my eyes at the identity politics game, and I think it's very dumb that the Trump people are coming out and they're very in leaks, of course. None of this is confirmed yet, but they're coming out in leaks saying yeah, we're going to appoint a Hispanic woman. What are they going to say about that? Try and Brett Kavanaugh her. Try and Bork her. Now, just from a historical perspective, what would make this one an interesting pick is that we had a very similar situation in 2018 to the situation that there was in 2016 and now in 2020 with regards to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 2018 we had that same situation with the Florida Supreme Court. There was a vacancy, and Rick Scott was not going to appoint a justice to replace that seat. We were going to wait. It was going to be, appointed by the next governor. And the next governor, by a narrow margin, happened to be Ron DeSantis, a Republican. And DeSantis appointed this Lagoa woman to the Florida Supreme Court. So it's kind of funny that, she could end up here getting appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court very quickly after, ascending to the Florida Supreme Court. In it's almost the identical situation, which in and of itself, the situation is quite uncommon. And she's actually not even on the Florida Supreme Court anymore. She was on there for less than a year. I didn't even realize that Trump had appointed her to the U.S. Circuit Court. So she is a federal judge now. So the next step up for her would be the Supreme Court. It's fitting. And I think the other reason why they really like this woman as a pick is that because she was just confirmed by the Senate, there's already a majority of senators on record voting in favor of her. So the confirmation hearings, really, there wouldn't be much to discuss. It's all out in the open. Now, the unfortunate thing is because this woman doesn't have much of a record on, say, the Second Amendment, I have no idea where she stands. I don't know what she believes. She could be great. She probably sucks, which is what tends to happen with Republican court picks when they try and sneak these people through who don't have much of a record. John Roberts is a good example of that. John Roberts, I believe, was Bush's last pick for the Supreme Court, and they wanted to pick someone who didn't have much of a track record because they wanted it to be an easier confirmation. They didn't want to have to, sift through all of this conservative baggage. And you know what? In this situation, considering that you're starting from the point of the last person being Ginsburg, maybe taking a chance on someone who's not so great isn't such a bad idea as long as you can get them through and get someone who's not Ginsburg on the court. Just kind of like the two people who were Republican appointees that turned out to be not, staunch conservatives were Anthony Kennedy, appointed by Reagan, and John Roberts, appointed by Bush. I look at Roberts and Kennedy, and I say, you know what? They don't go my way a lot of the time, but they are much better than Ginsburg ever was. Particularly Kennedy, because Kennedy kind of had a little bit, he tried to have a little bit more of a civil libertarian bent to him when he differed from, from the Republicans. Somebody like a Brett Kavanaugh, for example, terrible on civil liberties, an absolute travesty, but he is solid on the Second Amendment, which, as far as I'm concerned, that is what really, really matters with the Supreme Court. It would be nice if the Supreme Court struck down something like the NSA spying or whatever, but I don't think the intelligence community gives a damn what any court says. They have their stupid FISA courts, which are completely bogus, and I won't get into that situation. Now that I think about it, considering I do live in Florida, and I do know people in politics here, maybe there's some way I could try and talk to somebody who might know something about this woman, and actually be able to give me some insight into what her judicial beliefs are. Because I don't think she's really had to decide on matters of constitutionality very much. I think that in her time as a judge, she's dealt with, normal cases. Now, moving on from the content of this woman's character and on to the actual process and what's going to go on from here. Last night, the president was holding a rally, and he started a new chant. You know how in 2016 he had lock her up, lock her up? Well, this year, Trump is pushing fill that seat, fill that seat, which I have to say is quite funny. One day Ginsburg's been dead for a day, and the Trump supporters are already chanting fill that seat. It's just, I'm not shocked, and I'm not mad about it. I think it's a good thing. I don't think that we should have this this odd reverence for people. I think Michael Malice pointed out something quite insightful yesterday, is that the Supreme Court, while there are, in my opinion, a lot of people who hate the Supreme Court and resent them, Malice was looking at it from, well, compared to Congress and the executive branch, the average American has way more respect for the Supreme Court than they do those other two branches, and that's not healthy. People looked at someone like a Ginsburg and said, you know what, I may think that she's totally wrong, but I respect her as an intellectual and as a public servant or something like that. She's trying to do the right thing, even though she's crazy and believes things that are totally kooky. And this, and that has a lot to do with, sort of the mythical friendship between her and Scalia, and I believe also Sotomayor. They were good friends. And whereas with Congress, ordinary Americans think that senators and congressmen are bad people. They don't think that Supreme Court justices are bad people. They think that they are, either saints or just misguided, but they don't think that they are evil. Until Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh was the first Supreme Court justice that we saw get put through. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that, because Clarence Thomas, too. The left has always hated Clarence Thomas and thought that he was a vile rapist. But nevertheless, the court overall is still more respected than Congress and the executive branch. And this whole episode is going to have this was the topic of my video yesterday, talking about how this whole episode is going to have a huge delegitimizing effect on the judicial branch of the federal government. With Ginsburg dead, leftists are looking at the court and going, oh my gosh, we're defenseless without Ginsburg. The Republicans are going to control everything. They're going to get rid of Roe v. Wade and ban gay marriage and all sorts of other things. And so to them, the Supreme Court is illegitimate because, now it's going to be just a right-wing rubber stamp. And so what's their response? Oh, well, as soon as Democrats take back the Senate, we have to pack the court. And this is being, this is a very open thing. Now, they've been running trial balloons for this all year. People have been talking about packing the court as soon as there's a Democrat Senate, but now that Ginsburg is dead, it's totally out in the open. You have Jeffrey Toobin, an establishment hack that works for CNN, just a normal, boring Democrat pundit without any interesting opinions, coming out making the case to pack the court. This is something that not even Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a semi-fascist, was able to achieve in the United States. Even Roosevelt ended up not packing the court because he thought it was a bridge too far, because people back then were truly aghast by the idea. In fact, it was bipartisan. Republicans and Democrats in the Senate refused to pack the court on Roosevelt's behalf. But now you have people in the Senate, Ed Markey, and I'm sure others by this point, openly coming out and making the case themselves. They're not even waiting for the Democrat president to try and pack the court and then acquiesce. They are the ones saying that, affirmatively, that the next Democrat president, if they have a Democrat Senate, should put through as many justices as possible to tilt the court in the left's direction. And so, of course, the left's response to, in their eyes, the delegitimization of the Supreme Court, trying to relegitimize it by making it left-wing, will delegitimize it in the eyes of the right, and so therefore nobody will have any respect for the Supreme Court, which is the best possible outcome, as I said yesterday. We want, the Supreme Court has way too much power in American life. They have since, pretty much since the ratification of the Constitution, since Marbury v. Madison. The Supreme Court was never supposed to have this kind of power, and they have clawed more and more power away, and have, taken up an outsized role in all of our lives, for a very long time. And so I look forward to the day when people just say enough, and they start to say, you know what, the Supreme Court has made their ruling, now let's see them enforce it. And at that stage, if the Supreme Court is illegitimate, if nobody respects them, then, the U.S. federal government will be completely, irreparably harmed at that point. I don't see how we come back from that. That is a permanent wound. That is something that cannot be repaired. Who, after all this, is going to agree to go back to having just 9 justices and to trying to balance the court between, conservatives and liberals, and with one swing vote, like we've had for a long time? Nobody will want that. Whoever's in power will want to try and, shift the court as far as in their direction as possible, to make it that much harder, for the next, for when they're out of power, for their enemies to get things through and done. And so the U.S.'s governing institutions are breaking down, before our eyes. And again, this is a good thing. We want an outcome like the end of the Soviet Union, to where people said, you know what, this isn't working anymore, and we're going to go our separate ways. Now, unfortunately for the Soviet Union, it wasn't exactly a balanced federation, so Russia was by far the biggest part of the Soviet Union anyway, and Russia stayed together. So if you lived within Russia, you didn't get much more. You didn't get power devolved down to much of a lower level. However, if you lived outside of Russia, in one of the other Soviet republics, your country became independent, and suddenly your politics became much more localized. Which, you could say, well, a lot of those countries are still very corrupt or anything, or you look at Belarus and you say, well, Belarus is basically still a Soviet republic. They have the same old Soviet flag, just without a hammer and sickle. But the fact of the matter is that people still have greater influence over their government the more, the closer they are to the locus of power. That is ultimately how you build a stable and healthy, political order, is by having people feel like they have some stake in what's going on. The reason why there's so much unrest in America is because none of us really have power over anything. The way that our system is built, it devalues the vote of individuals to such a degree that the only people who can exert any influence over our governing regime are special interests who can afford to spend a lot of money lobbying on behalf of a particular cause, and just sort of, narrowing in on that in sort of a squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of way. But individual voters, we can't lobby on behalf of ourselves and our own interests. And so, we all feel left behind. And so every time that there is a crisis like this, where people are exasperated and feel powerless, and they look at the political situation, they need to I think more people will start to wake up to the need for a national divorce. And God help us, we don't want a two-state solution where you have red America and blue America, because it's much more complicated than that. Looking at our political divides in terms of party affiliation it's a very low IQ form of analysis. The reason why the nature of the divide in this country appears to be partisan is because that is the nature of our political system currently. The only sort of vectors of change, if you can even call them that, in our politics is that, well, if you don't like the government, then you can vote out the party that's currently in power and vote in the other guy. And so you end up with people who care about specific issues aligning with one side or the other, but it's not that they align with that entire, with all of the people on their side necessarily. For example, you have some people who are very pro-gun, but are also, pro-abortion. It just so happens that on a national level, on average, people who are pro-life are also pro-gun, and the people who are, pro-choice are anti-gun. And so that's how the parties line up. But, if you get down to a more localized level, you might have, again, people with different sets of views in different parts of the country who will vote different ways and end up with different outcomes, which is to be expected when you have a nation of 330 million people. And so I see these inherent flaws in our current system. Which again, these are not inherent to the founding of America. America was founded, even with the Constitution, which was much more centralized and not as good as the Articles of Confederation. Even under the original Constitution, things were far more decentralized than they are now, but it just so happens that over time, power becomes more centralized. That is a trend that a lot of the founding fathers saw, and that's why they didn't think that the Constitution would last nearly as long as it has. And so all these people trying to talk about how, we need people to stand up and be the adults in the room and to not risk, creating all this division by, which is going to be the result of this Supreme Court fight. McConnell and Schumer, should just sit down and have hash out a gentleman's agreement to not do anything. And I look at that as that, well, sure, if they can end the current conflict and pacify people for now, that's one thing. But there's going to be something else later. These sorts of divisions are inherent in our political system. So as far as I'm concerned, it is a good thing to accelerate not the divide, but the people's awareness of the divide in this country. Because as long as the United States is united, what you have is, 51% of the population always trying to force their views on, the other 49%. And, who is the 51% versus the 49% can swing back and forth. And so constantly all you're going to have is, people of very different worldviews trying to impose, their way of life on a group of people who don't want to live that way. And the Supreme Court is one of the most notable examples of this. You have the Supreme Court coming out and ruling that in that case in Chicago, that essentially nowhere in America can ban guns. And while personally I agree with that because I like guns, so I would like for everyone to have guns, the fact of the matter is that in a lot of the country there are people who don't like guns who would like to try and expunge civilian gun ownership from their society, and they don't have the power to do that by voting. And the same, is true because the Supreme Court, for the right that because of Roe v. Wade, everyone in this country, has the right to an abortion. And so it's only natural for these two groups of people to resent each other because their views are being imposed on one another. It's not a healthy situation, and people should just learn to go their separate ways. People need to accept that they're not going to be able to make everyone else live like them, and nor should they make everyone else live like them. And so I think that's about all I have to say about the upcoming court battle. I think it's necessary. I hope that in this case that the GOP does get through someone. But I see this judicial appointment as a means to an end, not an end in and of itself, if that makes sense. So if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.